I still have a photo on my phone of a parking lot at 11 at night. Nothing in it, just wet asphalt and a flickering light over an empty space where a car used to be. I don't know why I took it. I think I needed proof that a place existed before it stopped being mine. That was the lot behind the house I grew up in, if you could call it growing up. My dad bought that house when I was 6. He married Carol when I was 11, 3 years after my mom left, and never really came back into the picture. She calls twice a year, birthday and Christmas, and honestly that's its own story. Carol was fine in the beginning, not warm, not cold either. She made dinner most nights and she remembered my shoe size, and she never once in 6 years asked me a single question about my life that wasn't logistical. What time is practice? Did you turn in the permission slip? Are you eating at Danny's tonight or here? Then my dad had a heart attack. 46 years old, dropped in the garage while he was looking for a socket wrench, and Carol found him an hour later because neither of us heard anything over the TV. I was 15. For about a year and a half after that, Carol and I existed in the same house like two people who'd been assigned to share a hotel room by a travel agent neither of us trusted. Polite, distant. She kept paying for things, my phone, my clothes, food, and I kept my head down and got decent grades and figured that was the deal. Room and board for silence. I want to say the night she found out about me was dramatic. It wasn't really. That's the part nobody believes when I tell it now. She didn't catch me with anybody. She didn't walk in on anything. She found a conversation on my laptop that I forgot to log out of, me and a guy named Peter from my chemistry class. Nothing even that explicit. Just two 17-year-olds being awkward and hopeful with each other over text. And she read the whole thing standing in my doorway with her arms crossed. And when I came out of the shower, she was still holding my laptop like it was evidence in a trial. She didn't yell. I think if she'd yelled, I could have argued with her. Instead, she just looked at me for a long time and said, "Your father would be so disappointed." I remember laughing, not because it was funny. My body just didn't know what else to do with that sentence. She gave me 3 days. I didn't believe her at first. I thought it was one of those things people say and then walk back a week later once the anger cools off. It wasn't. On the 3rd day, she'd already changed the code on the garage door and put my stuff, most of it, in 2 black trash bags on the porch, like I was debris after a storm instead of a person who'd slept under that roof for 6 years. I called Danny first. His mom said he could stay, but only for one night. They had her sister visiting. I called 2 more people after that and got 2 more versions of "I'm so sorry, I wish I could." By 8 that night, I was sitting on a bus bench 3 blocks from a house that used to have my name attached to it, holding 2 garbage bags and a backpack, watching a digital sign cycle through bus times I couldn't afford because Carol had also, very efficiently, taken my debit card off the family account that same afternoon. I want to be clear that I wasn't crying at that point. I was too busy doing math. Where do you go at 17 when the place that's supposed to be yours by default just isn't anymore? I thought about the 24-hour diner on Route 9 because at least it was warm and they probably wouldn't kick a kid out for buying 1 coffee and sitting there for 6 hours. I started walking. I didn't make it to the diner. About halfway there it started raining, that cold late October rain that doesn't feel like weather so much as an insult. And one of my bags split open on 5th, and I was on my knees in a gas station parking lot chasing a rolling can of deodorant across wet concrete when a truck pulled up next to the pumps, and a guy got out and just stood there, watching me for a second longer than a stranger normally would. He was maybe mid-30s, flannel jacket, the kind of build you get from actual manual labor and not a gym. He didn't say anything dramatic. He didn't say, "Are you okay?" which I think I would have hated because I wasn't and I would have had to lie. He just crouched down, picked up a shirt that had blown a few feet away, folded it, actually folded it badly, but he tried and held it out to me. "Bag's shot," he said. "You got somewhere dry to put this stuff, or are we just admiring the parking lot?" I didn't answer right away. I was aware in a very loud way of how it looks, a grown man, a kid, a gas station at night. I think he clocked that I was aware of it because he took a step back, put his hands where I could see them, almost joking about it but not quite. "I run the shop across the street," he said and pointed. "Rosa's Garage," the sign said, faded gold letters. "I'm not gonna do anything weird, I just don't love watching a kid lose a fight with a trash bag in the rain. You want a coffee? There's a pot in the office, you don't have to take it." I took it not because I trusted him, because I was cold and it was coffee and coffee is not a commitment. His name was Mateo. I found that out because it was stitched on his jacket, not because he introduced himself right away. He was the kind of person who let you arrive at things instead of announcing them. The office smelled like motor oil and the particular burnt smell of coffee that's been sitting on a hot plate too long. He didn't ask me a single question while I drank it. He just kept doing paperwork at a metal desk, glancing up now and then like he was checking a pot on the stove. It was maybe 20 minutes before he finally said, without looking up, "You got a place tonight." "I'm figuring it out," I said, which is a phrase 17-year-olds use when they mean absolutely nothing is figured out. He set his pen down. "There's a room above the shop, used to be my uncle's before he passed. It's got a bed, a space heater, and it's not much else. You can have it tonight. Tomorrow we can talk about whatever the actual situation is if you want to talk about it. If you don't, that's fine too. I'm not gonna call anybody unless you tell me there's somebody I should call. I should tell you because I think it matters that I said no the first time. I actually walked out of that office and got about a block before the rain and the cold and the 2 garbage bags convinced me that pride was a luxury I couldn't currently afford. I walked back. He hadn't locked up yet. He just looked at me and said, 'Room's still there,' like I hadn't just humiliated myself by leaving and coming back in under 10 minutes. That was the first night of a year I still don't fully know how to talk about because it doesn't fit into the shape people expect when I start telling this story. Nothing happened that first night or the next or for months. I want to say that clearly because I know how these stories usually go in people's heads the second a grown man takes in a homeless teenager, and I need you to sit with the actual truth of it instead. He set rules. Real ones. The first morning, over eggs. He clearly didn't know how to cook well. I'd sleep upstairs, he'd sleep in the house behind the shop. I'd go back to school. He found out what school I went to and drove me there himself the second morning, sat in the parking lot until the bell rang like he needed to see me actually walk in the door. He got me on a bus pass. He never once touched me in a way that made me uneasy. And honestly, for the first few weeks I was waiting for the catch because that's what happens in the stories you hear, and it never came. What came instead was smaller and stranger. He taught me how to change oil on a Tuesday because I was underfoot and he needed something to do with me. He found out I liked to draw because he saw a margin doodle on a homework sheet, and 2 days later there was a sketchbook on my bed, no note, no comment, just there. He was not a talker. I learned more about him from what he did than what he said. That he'd lost someone once, young, a guy named Danilo, because there was a photo on his nightstand I saw once when I was helping him find a fuse box, and he caught me looking and just said, "That was a long time ago," in a voice that made it clear it wasn't actually that long ago at all, not to him. I turned 18 in March. He got me a cake from the grocery store, the kind with the plastic dome lid, and he'd clearly agonized over what to write on it because the guy at the counter had crossed out one attempt and rewritten "Happy Birthday Eli" slightly crooked underneath. It's a stupid detail. I think about it more than almost anything else from that year. I want to tell you the feelings crept up slowly because that's true, but I also want to be honest that I noticed something was different in me before I let myself think of the actual word for it. It was in the way I started caring what I looked like on the mornings he'd be in the shop. It was in the specific, embarrassing panic I felt the one time a woman came by to get her brakes done and stayed talking to him a little too long, laughing at something he said, and I went and reorganized a shelf of wiper blades that did not need reorganizing. I didn't say anything. I was terrified of two things equally: that he'd feel it too and that he wouldn't. Both felt like they would end something I needed too badly to risk. It was May, a few weeks before graduation, when it actually came apart into the open, and it wasn't romantic the way I used to imagine these moments would be. We were fighting, sort of. I got a partial scholarship offer from a state school 6 hours away, and I hadn't told him for almost a week because I didn't know how to say the sentence "I might leave" to the only person who'd ever made me feel like staying somewhere was possible. He found the acceptance letter on my desk by accident, looking for a screwdriver of all things, and when I got home from school he was sitting on the stairs to my room with it in his hands, and his face was doing something I'd never seen it do before, like he was trying very hard to look happy for me and losing that fight in real time. "This is good," he said. "This is a good thing, Eli. You don't sound like it's a good thing." "It is." He rubbed his jaw the way he did when he was choosing words carefully instead of just saying them. I wasn't ready to think about you not being upstairs." I sat down next to him on the stairs. Neither of us said anything for a while, which by that point in our year together wasn't unusual. We'd gotten good at silences that weren't uncomfortable, but this one had a weight to it. "I don't want to go if it means not." I stopped. I genuinely did not know how to finish that sentence out loud, even though I'd finished it 100 times in my head lying in that room upstairs. "If it means not what?" "I don't know how to say it without it being weird." "Say it weird then," he said. "I've heard weirder in this shop." So I did. Badly in pieces, looking at the stair below us instead of at him, I told him that somewhere in that year the room over the garage had stopped feeling like a place I was borrowing and started feeling like the first place that was actually mine. And that a huge, stupid, terrifying part of that had become about him specifically and not just the room. And that I understood if that made everything complicated or wrong or too much. But that I couldn't keep pretending I didn't feel it just to make it easier for both of us. He didn't say anything for what felt like an unreasonably long time, long enough that I started to regret every word of it. "I've known for a while," he finally said. "I wasn't going to say anything. You were 17 when I met you. I told myself a long time ago I wasn't going to be a guy who lets himself think certain things about a kid living under my roof, no matter what I noticed, and I meant that, and I still mean it." He looked at me then properly for the first time in that conversation. "You're 18 now. You're about to leave for school in a few months regardless. I don't know what the right thing is here. I've been divorced from what's right about this whole year since the day I picked up your shirt in a parking lot." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed, "it's not. We didn't kiss that day." I want to say that clearly too because I think it matters more than the eventual kiss did, that he made me wait not to torture me but because he needed to be sure that what I felt wasn't just gratitude wearing a different coat, and I think, honestly, I needed the same thing from myself. We talked instead. Really talked, for the first time, about him, about Danilo, about the 11 years since, about why he'd never really let anyone else in close, about how terrified he was of being the reason I second-guessed a normal life. I told him things about Carol I'd never said out loud to anyone, not even Danny. It was the most honest either of us had been with anyone in years, and it happened on a staircase, not a bed, which I think tells you something about what that year had actually been. Graduation came. He sat in the third row with a disposable camera because he said phones never got the lighting right, and he cried during the processional, which he denied for weeks afterward, though I have a photo, an actual, printed, slightly blurry photo of him wiping his eyes with the back of his wrist that proves otherwise. It was after graduation at the shop closing up on a night that felt like nothing special was supposed to happen that he finally kissed me. It wasn't dramatic. There was no rain this time, no big speech. I was locking the office door and he was turning off the lights and we just ended up close to each other in the dark for a second too long, and he said, quiet, almost like he was asking permission and stating a fact at the same time, "I've been waiting a long time to be sure this was okay." And I said it was, and that was that. I did go to the state school in the end. 6 hours felt impossibly far for the first 2 months, and then it didn't because he drove up more weekends than either of us admitted to anyone else, and I came back every break, and the room over the garage stayed exactly as it was the whole 4 years, because neither of us could bring ourselves to change it into a guest room, even after I moved my actual things down into the house behind the shop. Carol and I never repaired anything. I saw her once years later at a gas station of all places, a different one, and we exchanged maybe 4 sentences and she asked how I was doing in a voice that had no real interest behind it, and I said I was doing well, and I meant it more than she probably understood. I think about that first night constantly, not the trash bags, not the rain, not even the fear. I think about the specific, unremarkable moment of a man crouching down in a gas station parking lot to fold a shirt that wasn't his, because he didn't like watching someone lose a fight they shouldn't have had to fight alone. Everything after that came from a decision that small. I didn't know, standing there soaked and humiliated with deodorant rolling across wet concrete, that I was watching the actual beginning of my life instead of the end of it. We've been together 9 years now. The sign above the shop still says Rosa's Garage after his mother, and there's a second name stitched on a jacket hanging by the office door that used to just say Mateo and now, since last spring, says something else too in smaller letters underneath, because I finally learned how to work the embroidery machine he never let me touch when I was 18 and impatient and certain I already knew everything. I didn't. I'm glad I didn't. Some of the best things that ever happened to me were things I had to be patient enough and lucky enough to let happen slowly, on a staircase, in a garage, with a man who once folded a stranger's shirt in the rain and never once made me feel like a stranger again.